Thanks for joining me for another episode of Trip Report. On this episode, I'm going to talk about my experience with Salvia Divinorum. I'd previously mentioned in another podcast that my very first experience with psychedelics was mushrooms whenever I was 29 years old, and that prior to that I had no experience with any other drugs or mind-altering substances besides alcohol. That's not true. What it comes down to is the very first experience I had with any sort of drug was Salvia Divinorum. I don't count that as my usage of plant medicines because it was purely recreational back whenever I had done it, and I clearly didn't have much respect for it, but that being said, it was fascinating nonetheless. Salvia Divinorum, for anybody who is unaware, is a psychedelic. It comes from the Salvia Divinorum plant, which grows in the Oaxaca region of Mexico. As far as I know, that's the only where on the planet that it grows or that it's indigenous to. People are obviously cultivating it everywhere now, but it's a very bizarre plant, and I believe Salvinorum A, which is the active constituent in the plant, is still considered to be one of the most potent plant-based psychedelics known to man in terms of the limited amount of extract that's required for a full-blown hallucination. What's fascinating about this chemical is that it doesn't operate like all of the traditional psychedelics do on the serotonin receptors. Instead, salvia operates on the kappa opioid receptor. So very different receptors in the brain, but it still induces very heavy, completely dissociating, full-blown hallucinations. I would say my first encounter with it was in 2005. I was in the Marines at the time, and somebody had gotten hold of it and had it at the barracks. So we were all partying one night, and somebody had said, "Man, you got to try this stuff. It's so crazy." And I watched a few other people smoke it. Again, I had no experience with cannabis, any of those kind of things, and not really any experience with smoking anything at all. So I just kind of sat back and observed, and I was hesitant, but they had said, "This is a new substance, it's legal, you can get it in smoke shops, you can't pop on piss tests, they don't even test for it, so there's no issue with us being Marines and smoking this stuff." So I watched a few other people smoke it first, and for the most part it was just a lot of laughing, and people looked like they were, laughing and confusion. I can't say that they looked like they were having a good time, but before I had tried it, it didn't seem like anybody was having a necessarily bad time. And when everybody came back out the other side, it's a very quick acting psychedelic. At the most 5 minutes, but typically shorter than that. And when people would come back out, their only response was, "Man, that was so weird." So this is the jackass era days. And I was like, if anything's not going to kill me, sign me up. I'll do it. I'll try anything once. So I grabbed the pipe. They pack it full of, I think we had like 25 strength extract at the time. So these are concentrated versions of salvia. Typically, in the indigenous use, people will chew the leaves, but people have found that it's possible to smoke the leaves. But to take it to the next level, they pull the Salvinorum A extraction from the plant, and then they add it to dried leaf. So you're smoking, depending on what the number is on the bag, 10 times, 20 times, 40 times the strength of traditional salvia. So I think we started with 20 times, somewhere around there. But either way, my first experience was light the pipe, take a big long inhale, hold it, and this same onset happened every single time I smoked it. It was so bizarre, but I would feel a tingling at the base of my spine, and then my whole body would start to heat up. And then that tingling would slowly just start crawling up my spine and work its way all the way up. And then I would feel it come up my neck. And as soon as it crawled up into around my brain, that was right when the visual hallucination started. Now, it wasn't until years later that I had any experience or did any research on Ayurvedic philosophy, any of that kind of stuff, the whole thoughts of chakras and that kind of thing. But if there's one thing that makes me a true believer in energy being able to move through the chakra system, salvia is my best experience with it, because legitimately it started at that root chakra, crawled its way up to the head, and then I was full blown in this psychedelic experience. So the first experience, when it crawled up and it came on, my whole visual perception changed. And although I could see everything in the room in front of me, it appeared as if it had turned into straws. And that's my best way of explaining it, because there's no way to explain what I saw. But essentially, the entire visual space was circles. And then depending on the depth of where everything was that lie in front of me, the circles had cylinders that went off to the side that showed the depth of where everything was. So in all reality, it looked like a bunch of stacked up straws constructing my vision. Very bizarre. So I just kind of observed that for a minute or two and was probably laughing because it was just bizarre. Like your mind can't grasp it. So the way to handle it is just kind of laughing. And that's what it seemed like most people did, was just laugh. So it just started to fade away and go back to normal. And I came back out and everybody said, "What did you see? What did you see?" And I said, "I saw straws." And everybody laughed, and it was weird. I mean, it was entertaining. It was weird. And then it went on to the next person. So went around the room. Everybody tried it. Like I said, mainly just a lot of laughing. It seems to induce saliva output, which I guess is kind of funny because salvia saliva. But I saw people drooling like a Saint Bernard. I mean, just like drool pouring out of the sides of their mouth while they're laughing and incoherent. It was very bizarre. I don't know what mechanism of action causes that, but it was interesting to see. Went around the room, finally comes back to me again. I go into round 2. This time, take the inhale. Same thing. I feel it crawling up the base of my spine. As soon as it gets up to my head and goes onto the brain, it felt like amusement park rides where the whole room is rotating around you. And this isn't like the spins whenever you're drunk, that kind of thing. It wasn't that thing, and there wasn't any nausea associated with it. But what I saw was just my entire world rotating around me. And one thing that you'll see on a lot of the YouTube videos, and why salvia became popular and so frowned upon and made illegal in many states, was the video of a guy jumping out the window. And that's why this is a dangerous substance, is because when you are in a full-blown hallucinatory state, you have the ability to move still. Whereas on like DMT or something like that, you typically just go out. The salvia, you are very mobile. I mean, mobile with restriction. I mean, to where you're like in the body of a drunk. I mean, a hammered drunk, but you're still able to get up and move around, which is dangerous. But either way, the room starts spinning, and all I thought was, I have to get out of here. Like, I can't deal with this rotation, this spinning. So I get up and I'm like grabbing onto walls, trying to brace myself because it still feels like the room is spinning and I'm going to flip over, and everybody's laughing hysterically. So I get out of the room and then turn into like the entryway to the room in the barracks. And then I get out into like the courtyard of the barracks, which is outside. And when I get outside, the entire earth is spinning. And at that point, I just gave up. I laid down on the ground and just sighed, because it was like, okay, the whole world's spinning now. I can't get out of this. And then it wore off pretty quickly thereafter. People were laughing, staring at me, wondering what was going on. And I explained the whole world was spinning. So I think I had only done it twice that night, because after that second experience, I was very sweaty. Like I said, I heated up almost immediately from whenever I smoked it. And then I noticed a lingering headache afterwards, which worried me, because I was like, if my head hurts, then it's probably doing something negative to my brain, and maybe I should lay off of this stuff. So, mind you, we were also drinking. So it's a situation where it wasn't the best. I wasn't in the best atmosphere to be understanding what salvia was capable of. And it was clearly, I guess, abusing the medicine, if you want to call it that way, but purely recreational. So I think like the next weekend, this stuff was around because, everybody could get it at smoke shops, and it became this accessible thing for the military to use because you couldn't pop on a drug test. So when it would pop up, I would occasionally be like, well, let's give it another go. And the next time that I'd smoked it, we were, again, sitting in a barracks room, and my ex-wife was sitting next to me. We were dating at the time. And when it kicked in, again, same thing, crawled up the base of the spine, got to the head. It felt like I was dropping out of the world. Like, my whole body felt like it was dropping and sinking away. And I could see everybody that was sitting around to me to my left rising up away from me. So it was like I was dropping out of this world and I was going to lose all of them. So I like reached out and grabbed her by the shoulder and was trying to hold on while I was falling away, trying to hold myself into reality. And they're all laughing. She's confused. And then eventually the falling stopped. I came back to normalcy and then everybody laughed and I explained what happened. Yeah, super, super bizarre because you truly feel your body reacting to these changes of spinning and dropping and all these kind of things. And so having those experiences, now I watch the YouTube videos of people losing it, and I can understand why they're doing the things that they are to try to recover themselves from, a loss of reality. Now, that being said, I never tried closed eyes on Salvia because I was always, again, this is recreational. I had no experience with any other psychedelic before. I always just had my eyes open and was looking at my surroundings. I can only imagine how profound Salvia is with eyes closed. I mean, there's definitely has to be some visions back there, and I have interest in trying it again now that I have more respect for plant medicines and a little more understanding of how to use them properly. And like I said, this stuff is still available in smoke shops. I did buy some the other day. Like it is very easily accessible. And if you don't have it in any smoke shops near you, you can buy it online. I'm not telling you to get it because it is weird. And I know more people that have had really bad experiences and don't ever want to do it again than people who are intrigued to try it again, like myself. Getting into the bad trip territory, I think the worst one that I saw was one of my former roommates. He had smoked it and he had a look of just, I don't know, like this like soul crushing sadness and depression. And he couldn't speak. He was just making weird sounds. So he had this very, very sad look on his face and was just going, and everybody's laughing because they're like, what are you doing? What's this weird sound you're making? And it's comedy to them. And this one was long. I mean, he had been going for 7 to 10 minutes instead of your usual 5. And so I think people started to get a little worried. Some were laughing, but it was like, okay, he's still in there. He's still kind of freaking out a little bit. And when he came back out, he was like, what he explained was he was in a picture and the picture had a zipper at his foot, and it started to unzip around from his leg and coming all the way up around his body. And what he had said was, what his mind rationalized was, as soon as that zipper ended and he was finished being unzipped, that was game over. Like life was over for him. So obviously that would be very terrifying to experience, but he got on the backside of it. And as far as I know, he's one of the few people I know that were like, I will never touch that ever again. Like I've tried mushrooms, I've tried pot, all the different things before the Marine Corps. He was like, that is one that I will never, ever touch again. So it's not uncommon for people to have very bad experiences with this stuff. So my last experience with it, I believe it was the last one, we actually had some mailed out to us in Iraq. And because it was my second deployment over there, was just boring. We were on an air base. It was pretty safe at that time. I think we maybe only took 1 or 2 rocket attacks. It was just a safe air base that we were on. It didn't feel anywhere near as dangerous as the first deployment. So we were bored, and we would have alcohol shipped out to us in mouthwash containers, and just grab cokes from the chow hall and sip rum and cokes in the barracks. And then we actually got somebody to ship some salvia in a pipe out to us, and we were smoking it after work one day. And the experience that I had, again, same thing, crawled up the spine, got to the brain, and it seemed as if the message that came through to me was that we were a television show, that this whole life that I've lived from day one until now, it was like a Truman Show situation where it was like my whole entire existence in life and everything, that I was in a television screen for someone else's entertainment. And it was like, well, I'm still living this whole real life as is, but it's just not real. And it's like, it doesn't matter what my experience is with it and the people that I know and my interactions and what I do. It didn't matter because I was on a television show, and everything was fake. So didn't make sense, but it was still a little difficult to like wrap my head around, and I felt kind of bummed out that I was living a life that wasn't real. So not necessarily a bad trip, but bizarre. That's really the summary of all of my salvia experiences. Other than I maybe saw one or two really negative ones with other people, but other than that, it was mainly just a lot of laughing and confusion and saying that was weird. That being said, we were almost always, I was sober in Iraq, but almost every other experience was at a party and had already been drinking. So you already have a depressant in the brain. It's not working as well as it should. And then you're introducing a mind altering substance in there. So I think that had an impact on my full experience with it as well. But what really has me interested in experiencing it again is that I was listening to an episode all about salvia there's a podcast called Adventures Through the Mind. And the guy that was on there, who was a salvia practitioner and I guess held ceremonies for other people, he said that he smokes just the leaf. I think he said no extract, so very light doses. And he said that it's amazing for meditation, and that it sounds almost like doing a dieta with a plant before ayahuasca, where you do the plant in small amounts and you get messages from it. So this isn't the first guy I've heard talk about this. It said when you're on salvia, you get messages from salvia, from the entity, whatever it is. And what he said was he had a shoulder injury that had been bothering him for some time. He was a climber, and he said that his shoulder had just been killing him for months, and he had tried everything and nothing was working. So he smoked some salvia, went into the meditative state, and he asked, what can I do here? Like, please help me. What do I have to do to fix this? Do I need surgery? What's the deal? And the message that came through was, it basically guided him a way to reach his arm out, reach it to the side, and then fold his hand back and then rotate. And it gave him this series of movements that he said as soon as he finished that movement, he felt his shoulder clunk back into place, and he hasn't had pain in his shoulder since. So that's fascinating to me, because I think that this plant is capable of providing messages and helping, but not when you've been consuming alcohol and you're doing it purely recreationally. I think this plant, if you have respect and divination for it, that it's like all of these other medicinal, beneficial plants that can help humanity. So that being said, I do plan on dabbling with salvia again in the near future, and I will give an updated trip report on eyes closed with meditation and trying to see if any messages come through. But that's where I've been sitting. Like I said, I wanted to get this one out there. It's a very obscure psychedelic that you don't hear many people talk about. So I figured I'd get my experience with it out there before I dive a little deeper and see what it has to offer. So yeah, that's all I have on salvia. We'll leave it at that. And I think the next episode that I want to do is, like I said, the LSD and fake LSD. And I think then I'll probably just start diving right into the deeper, darker stuff that really I think was the most beneficial to me, and that's ayahuasca. So yeah, I'll try to get the LSD out this week, and hopefully I can get a couple other people in here in the meantime, and then we'll dive into the fun stuff. All right, thanks for joining me. Until next time, take care. Love you guys.